All right. So recently I was having a coffee with one of the cloud center guys, and he was a bit worried because he had actually told his customers to be able to order their cloud services directly at the hosting provider and not through him. So he was a bit puzzled in what should he do afterwards. And while hearing him talk, I was sitting and smiling and nodding so much that the person next to me said, "Are you in the cloud team as well?" I'm not, but it reminded me of a journey that I've been doing, and really what is the story of this talk. And actually, I was just in the previous talk with Mark, and he was talking. So what happens when we tell when IT services they move and develop and become commoditized? What happens to the people that used to maintain the data center and so on? So I have some similar stories, and I also have some maps in between that help me understand what was happening. At a point in time, I also called this talk, "We have outsmarted ourselves again." But don't worry, we have a map. So a bit about me. You might know me, not know me so far, but my job is to be a senior advisory consultant, specifically within test strategies and test automation. I work in a company called NNIT AS, which is internationally mostly around helping life science customers, or life science companies. And my day-to-day job is not around sort of the classic software development projects. It's mostly, programs and projects that actually change sort of the underlying concepts of the companies. It could be that a classic one could be that they now want to go more agile, or they want to move all their services to the cloud, or so more transforming and transitioning solutions. So that's my day-to-day job. And in my spare time, I guess you could put it that way, I'm a Wardley mapping cartographer. Oh, that's a fancy word. I've been lucky to have one item on the Wardley Maps the Awesome list. It's an article I wrote called "Broadening the Scope of SUT," that is broadening the scope of the system under test. And I have a couple of posts on the Wardley Mapping forum. We'll tap into that in a bit. And I have had a personal blog since 2012. And one of the first posts actually I put here, "Today's innovation becomes tomorrow's commodity." And that's actually a quote from Simon. Yesterday's new ideas become tomorrow's best practices and tomorrow's commodity systems. So I've been working with Wardley mapping for quite a while, and I recently did an online workshop with the Ministry of Testing on how to create test strategies that are based on business needs. And in that, I used Wardley mapping. I also have a book coming up, which is called Goal-Aligned Test Strategies, where I use Wardley mappings for the same. So I have drawn this sort of simple map, and my maps in this presentation are mostly simple, and I think that is to help you all understand it. Where do you see yourself? Where do you feel most comfortable in working? And I'm sort of in the middle of things. I like things not that they are brand new. I like them when they have sort of formed on the right-hand side, and I'm interested in what are the user needs. And then I want to push them to the right, I guess, with the yellow arrow, push them there and help them get started and get implemented. I'm not personally super keen sort of on taking existing frameworks and, just following them by the book. I'd rather, pick up ideas, but that's the way it is. Where would you see yourself? Is that mostly on new things, or is it like me in the middle, or is it more on the right-hand side of optimizing solutions. Please use the chat, give it a thought or two. In the middle. Thanks, Ralph. Oh, that's some good replies. Thank you. And yeah, following the pioneer settlers and town planners, I would probably be a settler as well. So I know that some better words being explored for those three concepts, but let's just use them for now. Thank you. So back to the cloud team. So what they trying to do? So they were coming from the background of having a classic infrastructure as a product or a data center really, and they were moving to a compute and storage as commodities, as we talked about a lot of times, and they were going, so what is going to happen to us now? So they were, as I mentioned, part of an IT vendor, and they had thought their spot was sort of here and looking towards a movement to the left and probably down, that they wanted to commoditize and standardize their services out here to the right. But what they did was actually they enabled the user to create servers on their own, and also made it more visible, but also a commodity the user could bring it up and tear it down very fast. And the IT people will go, so what's happening to us? And so I was working on another project, and that team was saying, yeah, let's use OutSystems, which is low code, no code development platform. You simply build an application by dragging and dropping boxes onto a canvas, and then whoopsie, you have an application. Oh, that reminded me of something. So instead of having application development as a standard, we could actually move it up, as we just saw, and make it more visible and make it enable the users to do it themselves. Huh, that's interesting. We've seen that before. We've seen that with step functions in Lambda, where Tim Bray sometime in September said, oh, can you hear that screaming? That's the sound of huge number of utility glue Lambda functions realizing they are now super redundant, I guess could be a better word for it. Those words. And we see a lot of interesting things happening in the low code, no code landscape. I mean, there's a new low code, no code tool emerging every day, it seems. There's databases and automation tools and internal tools and product management tools and websites. Nah, it's just something you bring up and tear down, yes, if you'd like to, and mobile apps and so on as well. So this is just an example of what's happening in that space. And this one is a favorite of mine. Well, underneath, even low code, no code seems like a spreadsheet. And Rosie has an interesting point here, is what problems are we trying to solve with that new kind of tools, and what problems are being solved with that tool. So talking about low code and no code, I will have to bring up this one because that's what I experience a lot when talking and writing about it. It's the adaptation cycle from Simon. Every time we go and say, yeah, you should use low code, and the coding enterprises would go, no, damn it, we said that already. Low code is not the future. But it seems it's at least emerging. So I wrote an article about this, or a blog post in April last year, it must have been. Low code involves and outmaneuvers high code. So I could see that low code as a practice and a solution moved from being sort of an oddity to be more and more practice. And the users preferred it due to the visibility. And I also sort of put it, coding required. The less coding required, the more preferred it would be, and more visible it would be to the user. What has made it possible is, of course, high code as a solution. No, sorry, as a practice, and probably also a solution. There's some underlying components here that have moved and made all these responsive web apps possible. High code as a practice, I think that's what I thought when I made this. High code as a practice is a commodity. I mean, you can hire a team anywhere and say, build an application, they'll sit and write it in Visual Studio and produce an application for you. So actually these probably both should be here on the right. There we go. Find bugs in my maps, but that's the idea. You think about it and you move it. Okay, but let me get back on track. We could see that there's a trend that low-code tools evolve. We have practices and solutions that are emerging, and the users pick up that same story as with the servers before. So we had a great discussion because I put this on the leading edge forum discussion forum of the community of Wardley maps that Christoph put up. So there seems to be a new low-code tool every day these days. So what will happen to the space? Will it compact? That is, will Microsoft eventually buy them all, or whatever is the game plan? Or will they become more pervasive? That is, they'll become more embedded or commoditized? Will they be part of solutions? Is this the end of programming as we know it? Nope. But we have indeed outsmarted ourselves again. And is this just another higher order programming level? And we'll get to that in a bit. One in the discussion, I can't remember who said, are these tools then primarily domain specific? They might be, I realized, but there's definitely a trend happening now that a lot of low-code tools and the server solution, as we discussed before, the application development is as well a strong trend that is happening. So perhaps we could just spend a few minutes here in the chat and give your thoughts on that before we move along.
So quite recently, I have seen a post on LinkedIn bringing up very old memories of Delphi Studio. I'm not sure if you remember or are familiar with it, but this was essentially a drag and drop editor which allows you to build forms. And the description was that low-code tools, they were already there and they didn't work at all, which is quite consistent with your message. But what I'm also thinking, and this is like a part which I mean is not consistent within me, is that low code offer or promise that your developers, perhaps, or even some of the managers or field workers will be able to create solutions of rather poor quality, a very short-lived solution, but they will be able to create them at speed, not even at scale, but rather at speed, which means that they will be able to automate some of their work. But what is missing completely from this picture is the entire retention and management policy. Because if you get a company which has a 5,000 employees, not a very big one, and 500 employees is actively writing low code extensions or low code processes, what happens when those people leave? Right? It's almost like the skill that is completely missing, a skill or doesn't exist yet, which we have to acquire. This is just my sort of observation, right? Because what is happening is we change or we say that low code platforms are evolving, and at some point one of the big players will own that space, but we are not really talking, or we don't seem to be talking in public about associated practices.
I have one view. I have an example coming up in a bit, but I just thought we could, take a moment to reflect on the trend. It's out there definitely, and we might have outsmarted ourselves again. So there's some good. Thanks all for the comments. Yeah, actually, I remember Delphi Studio as well. Oh, awesome. Well, let's roll a bit further. because we could discuss this, I guess, all day. But I do have an example, and for that I need a legend, a map legend. I guess Simon would be the personal map legend, but there we go. So I have made my own table here, and I use sort of my own, I guess, could be a way to remember the four stages: the darlings, the pets, the cattle, and the goods. And it came from a presentation, I think, at the GoTo conferences years back, where they talked about their their servers being either pets or cattle. So pets, you would nurture them, or you would take good care of them, and cattle you would more or less kill, but they still had a name. So eventually you could have that it's just a good, it's just an ID somewhere to the very right. And to the left are all your darlings and your pet projects and your, as I put here, when I explore sort of the legend, the one-offs, the hunches, all the novel and unstable things, and the things that are on premise or one location only, as they were developed originally, whether the pets are probably in a shared data center somewhere. Yeah, the cattle are more cloud-based, and the goods are just some services. I sometimes explore the space of difference between the hunches, the explored, the tool-aided, and the autonomous, or as I just actually saw before, sort of the pervasive or embedded activities on the commodity side. So that's some of the words I also use to label the evolutionary axis. So as I started out by saying, I work a lot with test automation, and what's happening is that in that space is there's a lot of low code, no code test automation tools coming around. And what we usually did was sort of this, that we would take a system under test and we would write Selenium code or Java code or all other codes, classic, I don't know, high code test automation. And there were a trend to do that more and more, and we'll dig into that in a bit. But what is happening now is that the low code tooling enables the business users to do that initially. And that's a promise, as you also mentioned, Christoph. That's probably more than a promise than what is happening really. But it's hard to change when you're not prepared. And this space, a lot of change is happening. So we have a lot of sort of implicit knowledge that we can do something about. And then we have sort of the codified knowledge that we can do even more about. And probably the business users knows mostly about the implicit knowledge, the hunches, as we explored a bit before. Oh, it always hurts when we press this button. And classic SIT testers can codify it. So I had to figure out, so where do testers move then if we can automate a lot of things with shift left capabilities into the code, and we can automate things in the low code up here at a higher level. So I was drawing this map, and without the clouds, there was just a trend happening with low code and a trend happening with a lot of things going through engineering practices and being coded. So what spaces were left for the testers? And I said, there's an empty space right here, right out here on the left side of the map, where the explorer can exist. The explorer might not have all the business knowledge. We can draw that perhaps depending on context, where is this cloud, but there's stuff out here on the left that is interesting, that is only a person can do and use exploratory testing for. And perhaps there's a space also here to the right-hand side that supports the growth here and probably taps in here, but I could use sort of the white space in the map to say, okay, we should move here. There's a trend happening here. There's a trend happening here. Let's use the white space to position the toolsmiths in this space here. And then we figured out that even low code was just a higher level programming language, because even though we did push the capabilities up to the end users was going, yeah, it's nice with that low code tool, but can it do an if statement? Can it do exceptions? Could it do a loop and a hoop and import from data sources? And will the code be available in source code? And suddenly there's a drive from what was before a low code solution being enabling the business, could be drawn up here, to create applications fast, as you also said. But there's a drive that they want this stuff as well. And then it's pushed back, I guess could be one way to put it. We want it to be more special. We wanted to have more features. It will be a request for the IT team. You should add this as a feature. It will come down here. It'll be added again. It will be pushed up, and there'll be a circle here, and eventually it'll be just a programming language, albeit in another form. And with that, I'm probably going to need a bigger map, because what's happening up here is that we're actually supporting a business needs. We have a VP of some business up here. He is interested in reacting to a market. He's but also interested in having a stable operations. And we can tie that down into, okay, we need to react to the market. We need to build some features. We need to have them built and tested and moved forward. We need the stability of the solution, and then two vendor plays could be, okay, advise the business up here, and then another play could be here to evolve solutions that can then be commoditized. I guess that could be probably similar to some of the patterns in the book, but I haven't reached that far yet. So in the end, I see, yes, yesterday's new ideas becomes tomorrow's best practices, today's best practices, sorry, and tomorrow's commodities. And there's plenty of ideas to evolve on. And actually, that was my pitch. So we can open the floor, but let's remember we can talk a long time, I guess, on pros and cons on low code. What interests me is how can we use the map to learn from it, and what do we do when we outsmart ourselves again?
Wonderful talk, Jesper. Very good pictures. If somebody likes to join us here on the here I have Gail. Somebody joins the session and had a little bit discussion because we have time. Please put on the right of the browser that you want to share your audio video, and when we get an invitation, and we can bring you to the screen here, to the session board. Who has questions or wants to ask? So, who wants to come up and join us? Roberto, Philip. Okay, wonderful.
Perhaps one at a time. Oh, Philip.
Philip, close the door.
Hi, Holger. How are you? Can you hear me okay?
Yeah, thank you. From United States.
Jesper, really, very good talk and very interesting. I wonder if you have any thoughts on the regulatory implications. So for software development and testing in an industry that's regulated, I wonder if how complex do you think that might get?
Oh, it can get very complex. There could be some benefits, actually. There definitely could be some lessons with mapping this out in the compliant So I have a lot of echo here. Perhaps could you mute? Yeah. Thank you. Sorry, it's hard to hear yourself with the echo. In a life science space, there could be some interesting things to map out here. Could we base our solutions on commoditized solutions that had been validated previously? Could there be a benefit in providing validated platforms for document management and so on? Definitely, there could be some white spaces in that area. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, thank you. I think it's a topic for, let's say, additional development.
And Philippe?
Yeah, that's also something I'm discussing later. But what you're saying is, for me, most businesses, and I work a lot in organization design in digital, most businesses are looking to optimize the flow of work,
Mm-hmm.
but the flow of work is not quite the flow of value. And when you think about the flow of value, there is one obvious one is, how do you flow innovation into the work? And the zone to wins and how an innovation will become the way of doing the work, and how actually the industrialization of that enables bandwidth to free bandwidth for innovation. And now most organizations are kind of looking in the middle, just iterating on what they know and what they do, but they never go to the extra mile to the right of the map. And because they don't do that, they can never go to the extra mile to the left of the map. And everything stays in the known, in the middle. And you know, as Simon says, in a way, the most they're gonna get is feature iteration. And most agile implementations as a result end up as a bit of a sausage factory of delivering software. And they, you know, organizations try and becoming a better sausage factory of delivering software.
Mm-hmm.
But that's looking at the middle of the map. And the real organization change is actually looking at working with the full range of the map and flowing the work, flowing industrialization, flowing innovation into the flow. So have you found that same thing? And have you done some thinking around those themes?
Not yet. So thank you for the idea. What I realized definitely is mapping it out and then using the white spaces to position yourself is really a key lesson in this. So yeah, definitely, you know, realizing that there's stuff on the left that you're not used is a good lesson. Thanks, Philippe.
Okay, thank you. So exploiting the blank spaces.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Good, thank you.
That's a good catch, actually, exploiting the white space. Cool. Thanks, Philippe.
I leave the space for others to come in.
Yes. Anyone else? Wouter, perhaps you have some comments. I don't know if you would like to join and explore them. Along the way, I have used a lot of material on my blog, and in a bit there'll be a blog post with all the links. So I'll make sure to put that somewhere shared.